Okay, today is a lecture day, so let's jump right in. Our first discussion question. Do you think it's reasonable for Margot to expect Patricia's approval for killing Friday guy? Why or why not? It's on page 85. So we finally get to see Margot kill someone. Um, she has invited Friday guy, the guy who looks at porn in the library, has invited Friday guy to her apartment, has gotten him drunk, and then he leaned on me as I held him firmly around the waist and led him downstairs, out into the parking lot. It was late Sunday by then, and no one was around. The lights hung dim over the rows of cars. We skirted the edge of light, heading for the dark back lot, for that spot by the dumpster I'd found. A dumpster is where you put your trash. It was cold out, but I'd remembered my coat. And Friday guy's beer-soaked blood would keep him warm for as long as it mattered. He was trying to speak, his breath making clouds of hot air. But I shushed him, just as I would have if we'd been at the library. It was cozy, shushing him. He quieted down and nuzzled my neck like a child. When I got him in place on the pavement behind the dumpster, I stood up to catch my breath. I wasn't as young as I'd been 2 years ago. I was out of practice, too. I scanned the rows of dark or blue-lit apartment windows, landing on Patricia's. Her windows were black, as I'd expected they would be. She'd had a long weekend, ferrying that boyfriend of hers around. Still, I half hoped she'd appear, that I'd see her waving and smiling in the window, telling me this was right. But that was silly. I didn't need her telling me it was right. I knew it was down in the pit of me. And then she goes on to kill him. So this first question, is it reasonable for Margot to expect Patricia's approval, telling her it's all right? I mean, on one hand, obviously not, right? If you're killing someone, you probably shouldn't expect another person to approve of this. But in Margot's psychology, she has over the past couple of weeks formed a bond with Patricia. We've been talking about how they bonded over the shared book. They bonded over like their past experience, discussing their past experiences. They both have more or less the same secret from each other. Um, that Patricia is writing fiction about Margot, but not letting Margot know, and that Margot has a past that she doesn't want Patricia to know. So in many ways, they are quite similar. And we also know that Margot in the past has also hoped for a good friend to understand why she goes around killing people. So, from her perspective, in her mindset, if anyone in her life right now could give her approval, it would probably be Patricia. So, in that sense, it's less unreasonable than looking to someone else for approval. What do you guys think? You have other ideas? No? Okay, then let's move on to question two. Margot thinks that there's never time enough to turn something you want to keep in your hands and examine it. To like look at it from different angles. Do you agree? Why or why not? This is on page 86. You know what? Since it's just the next page, why don't we keep reading about how Margot kills this guy? Where are we? Friday guy slurred from below. Nowhere, I said, and he giggled. I fingered the vial in my pocket, the syringe in my other. So a vial is a glass tube to hold liquid. A syringe is a needle. Souvenirs I'd kept from my hospital days. I felt a flash of that surety I'd always had as a nurse, moving fluidly from one task to the next, checking the blood pressure in room 110, making sure 32 had a bowel movement, which means that 32 used the restroom, opening the curtains in 16, and getting her to eat something, even pudding. I had been so certain, so secure, that just as I was right then touching that cool glass and plastic in my pockets, it gave me a boost. I gave her encouragement. I looked down with my seasoned professional eye and saw right through him, through his skin and bones and hair, to his absolute core, to his polluted, human, hurting self. He was dozing like a baby. When I lowered myself down over him, the gravel dug into my knees. This was much less comfortable than the hospital, or even the library bathroom. I gritted my teeth against the pain and leaned close. Steve, I said. I knew his name. I'd always known it. I shook him, and his eyes fluttered open enough for me to pry open the lids. His eyes had rolled back. There was only white. It was time for the shot. I wanted to relish the moment, my thighs clenching his middle, my breasts resting on his chest as he lightly snored. But there wasn't time. And there never is there? When you want to keep something, to turn it in your hands and examine it, the moment just before, the moment just after. There's always that ticking of the clock, that hot breath on the back of your neck. Move it, move along. There are other things to do and people are waiting. There was no one waiting then, of course. We were two souls adrift in a dark and empty universe, breathing together, communing in a way most people never do, out in the ruthless world. I could have lain my head down on him and drifted for a while. I lost track of the pain in my knees and began to feel how I'd felt on those hospital beds, safe, securely held. But something wasn't right. Something nagged at me, stirred in me. I wasn't content. I wanted more. Time wasn't the problem. The hot breath at my neck was my own. I fumbled in my pockets for the shot and filled the syringe from a half-seated position. It slid right into the skin below his ear. Okay, so here Margot is in the process of killing him, and she suddenly thinks, I wish I could stop and enjoy this moment more. I wish I didn't have to keep going. But it turns out there is no rush. The only reason why she can't stop is herself. I wanted more. I wanted him dead. So, this idea that when you want to keep something and to examine it and to enjoy the moment, there's never enough time for you to do that. Do you agree? Maybe you do agree, and there might be two reasons for this. One is, in fact, as Margot says, there's always the next thing. There's always someone else. There's no time for you to pause in your daily busy life. But even if you do have the time to pause, maybe what you want is the entire moment, that entire instant. But instead, you only get this part now, that part later. Time doesn't pause for you. You want the whole thing, but you only get what you see right now. Or maybe it's something that you only later realize was a very important moment. And when you realize this, the moment has already passed and it's never coming back. Which that's, of course, how memory works. And that's also why memories can be beautiful and painful at the same time. You remember going through something, you remember it being great, but you remember that at the time you did not feel this way. You were not able to enjoy the moment as you now think you should have. What was the saying? Uh, Youth is wasted on the young. When you're young, you don't realize what a gift being young is, and you only realize it when you're old. Another saying goes, life has to be lived forward, but can only be understood backward. And in some sense, reading literature can help a little bit with that. If you read other people's experiences, other kinds of experiences, it can kind of suggest what life might be like as you move forward through time. But of course, no life is like your own. Every life is different. So that might be the logic behind any time you feel like, ah, the moment has passed too quickly. Other thoughts or questions about number two? Yes. Yes. Okay. So as we saw when Margot found Judy, what she's really after is the moment of death. She likes to lie on top of her victims, stare into their eyes, and watch as the life disappears from their eyes. And to do this, she also um, kind of breathes into their face. So that's why earlier she says, where is it? Time for the shot. Yeah. So using the needle. Yeah. And that's what she does here, right? She sticks the needle right behind right below his ear. You want to keep reading? You want to see how he dies? Let's look at how he dies, just for fun. He gasped awake in seconds. His mouth hung open like he wanted to speak or scream. He flopped on the ground. I slid my body over his like a weighted blanket. And as he seized, which means he has a seizure, so like in Chinese, 发癫痫, that kind of movement, I pinned him. So I made sure he stayed on the floor. I soothed him and fitted my mouth to his, breathed into his. So that's another part of her ritual. She likes to share air with her victims. I found his staring eyes, their black pupils eating the gray of his irises. So the middle part keeps expanding and, like she says, eating up the parts with color. Bliss rose up in me like a hot fist, spreading through every limb. So this is where she feels joy. I rode his body as he seized again, then went still. I collapsed over him, spent, breathing hot air into his dead, gaping mouth. So that's how she kills people. Okay. Do you have other thoughts or questions about number two? Okay. If not, let's move on to number three. Do you think Patricia's interview with the detective feels suspicious? Why or why not? Last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, we talked about Margot's interview with the detective. Now it's Patricia's turn. And I really enjoy the fact that Patricia does not have an interview with the cop until she has something to hide. When she is actually innocent, the cop doesn't care. But now that she has a secret, now she has to talk to the cop. I love that. Okay, so the cop comes back on page 94. We are looking at the story from Patricia's perspective. It's Thursday when the detective returns. He's wearing the same black hat and removes it grandly as he walks through our doors. I see him before Margot does, then watch her fix him with her gaze. So now Margot is staring at him. To my surprise, and probably to Margot's too, he turns toward the reference desk and approaches me, letting his fingers rest lightly on the edge of my desk. Ms. Del Marco, he says, giving me a slight gracious nod. I acknowledge him with a smile, my eyes darting to Margot. So she quickly looks at Margot. She's staring intently at the two of us. Do you mind if I take a seat? He asks, not really asking my permission, of course. I gesture toward one of the nearby chairs, which he pulls up and perches on across from me. He retrieves his small notebook and pen and sets them on my desk. I'm highly conscious of my own notebook and pen, sitting just to the left of my hand, directly in his line of sight. I feel an urge, like a twitch, to cover it the way I do whenever Margot approaches, but I keep my hands still and fold them together before me. I attempt to smile and try not to give any outward signs of the startled beating of my heart. You live at 442 Roadway, correct? He asks, pen poised above paper. I nod as heat rises to my face, as if merely answering his question reveals my guilt. I feel the words rise in my throat, the words that would end this conversation and everything else. Margot, behind you, is the one you're looking for. She killed the person in the dumpster. She killed many others before that, too. I could keep my face straight and my voice low and smile at the end so that Margot would never know. I could do it now and be done with it. Instead, I swallow and wait patiently for his next questions, trying not to clench my hands, trying to remember to breathe. I guess I don't need to tell you what happened there yesterday, huh? Terrible thing. You must be upset to have that right on your front lawn, as it were. So the phrase as it were means as if it were true, which means that he's using a metaphor. And the metaphor is the front lawn. A lawn is grass in front or behind of your house because Patricia lives in an apartment. She doesn't have a lawn. So when he's saying front lawn, he just means right in front of your place. And he's pointing out that he's using a metaphor. I scramble for words. It's shocking. I moved from Chicago not too long ago and didn't expect to have things like that happen here, I say. I thought I was coming to a sleepy little town. I try for a slight chuckle, but my voice cracks. So Patricia tries to softly laugh a little bit, but her voice doesn't behave. Parson simply nods and scribbles notes. I risk looking up to see Margot openly staring, a blank look on her face. Or is it a focused look? Is she straining to hear us? I tell myself she can't possibly hear us, and besides, I've said nothing objectionable so far. Detective Parsons settles in, crossing his right leg over his left and moving through a series of questions that circle closer to the matter at hand. About how long I've lived in the apartment building, how I like working at the library, where I was Sunday and Monday nights, and finally, what I might have seen or heard on those nights. I'm relieved to be able to answer these questions matter of factly. I've lived in the apartment for about a month. I enjoy my work. I was home Sunday and Monday nights. I saw and heard nothing. It was only later that I saw everything, of course, but only in my mind, which I transferred to paper. What if I showed him a few key pages from the notebook sitting right by my hand? And did you see anything odd or noteworthy on the day they discovered the body? Any neighbors acting weird? Anyone who, I don't know, seemed nervous? His question catches me off guard. I see Margot so clearly, humping that shovel down the road, coming upon the lights and the chaos, barreling forward with that determined lurch in her step. So on that night when Patricia was coming home, she saw Margot carrying a big shovel walking toward their place. Um, I say, managing to shake my head as I look him in the eye. No, everyone was disturbed, but also kind of enjoying the whole thing, you know? Or not enjoying per se. Per se means literally. That's the wrong word. But it did seem that people were worked up, excited even, in a bad way, of course. I'm not sure what Detective Parson makes of this word salad of mine, but he's writing things down in his notebook. A word salad just means a random combination of words that don't make sense. But no one in particular you remember? I realize you may not know any names since you're new to the area. You do know Ms. Finch, though, don't you? One of your neighbors. He's talking about Margot. He smiles then and tips his head back slightly to indicate her. She's distracted right now by the presence of a patron. I could take this brief window of safety, of freedom from the weight of her gaze, and tell him. She came home carrying a shovel. She told me she planned to work in the garden, which doesn't exist as far as I know. Instead, I say, yes, I know Margot, of course, but I don't remember seeing her that day. Outside of work, I mean. The detective stares at me for a long moment, then bends to his notebook, moves his pen. He abruptly stands. Thank you, Ms. Delmarco. I appreciate the help. I hope your building recovers from all this fuss before long. He flashes his bright white smile, lifts the hand holding his hat in a kind of salute, and turns away. So that's Patricia's interview with the cop. Does anything feel suspicious? Have a secret. But could we see her behaving like she's nervous? Some of you are saying no. Let's take a closer look. How about here? She smiles at him and then she quickly looks at Margot. He's a cop. He can tell when you like look at someone very quickly, just for a moment. So the last time he came to talk to Margot, Margot seemed to be the main suspect if there needed to be a suspect. Now looking toward Margot, trying to hide the fact that he's looking toward her. If the cop catches this, that feels suspicious. Someone else has died. Now you're looking at your coworker who I suspected last time. Okay, and then when he pulls out his notebook and pen, Patricia can't help looking at her own notebook and pen full of stories about Margot the killer. She wants to cover it with her hands. To prevent that, she folds her hands in front of her. So she prevents one action with another action. And to fold your hands in front of you means to put one hand on top of the other, and it looks like she's putting both hands on the table. Is that a natural pose? Looking out across the room, not one person has their hands okay, one person only has their hands folded in front of them. So it's not exactly a natural pose. Um, Suspicious behavior also includes behavior to avoid suspicious behavior. Right? In Chinese, we say the more you hide it, the more it's there. 欲盖弥彰. Uh, okay, what else do we have? I swallow and wait patiently for his next questions. How many times do you swallow it every day? You don't know. Nobody counts. But we usually don't swallow unless we have something in our mouth. But Patricia doesn't have anything in her mouth. So swallowing is a sign of nervousness. Next thing, I try for a slight chuckle, but my voice cracks. First of all, a slight chuckle. I thought I was coming to a sleepy little town. Yeah, that's kind of funny, but we're talking about some guy who died in front of your place. This seems to be a similar mistake to what Margot tried to do. She tries to laugh off serious issues. If you remember her interview, she tried to make a joke about a bit nerdier. And then even when Patricia tries to give a small laugh, her voice betrays her. It's not a natural laugh. Then she looks up at Margot again. Does she think that a cop writing things down won't notice her looking somewhere else? And then he asks that question that surprises her. Did you see anything strange? She, in preparing to answer, she shakes her head as she looks him in the eye. Once again, I ask you, is this a natural movement? To look someone in the eye while you shake your head. Feel natural to me. So stereotypically, Western cultures appreciate it when you look them in the eye, when you talk to them. It's a sign of honesty and trustworthiness. But studies of people actually behaving naturally with each other have shown that when you're talking to somebody, you don't always look them in the eye. Usually, you look them in the eye when you want to show that you're paying attention, or right after you're finished talking and you want to let the other person know it is now their turn to talk. Neither of those situations are happening here. Patricia is not listening. She's not passing the torch to the cop. She's trying to reassure him that she's being honest. Once again, the more she tries to hide things, the more strange they feel. And then she kind of waffles on this word enjoying. If we go back to the scene where people discover the body, it is true. There are many spectators very excited about something happening, but maybe enjoying is a bit too positive for finding a dead body. In fact, the word enjoying is describing Patricia because she finally gets to kind of almost witness her killer Jane Margot character kill someone else. For her, it's exciting, it's fascinating, it's more positive than it should be. So again here she's trying to cover that up, right? Enjoying, not enjoying really, excited, but in a bad way. So she's trying to control her positive emotions, but she's not very successful. And you can see um, that she's very worried the cop will notice these strange things. But I think just like in his interview with Margot, he's very good at pretending not to notice. And he does have his target aimed at Margot. And then once again, Patricia gives a weird answer. I know Margot, of course, but I don't remember seeing her that day. outside of work. A more expected answer might be, after we left work, I didn't see her again, right? Following chronological order, the order of time. But here, Patricia first emphasizes, no, I didn't see her. And then she realizes that sounds weird because we work together. So she adds, I mean, after work. But like adding that kind of points out how strange it is that she doesn't mention work first. We know it's because she's trying to lie her way out of this. She's so focused on telling the lie that she forgot to make it sound natural. But here the detective does in fact catch something strange here. He stares at me for a long moment. I think here he's thinking that Patricia is trying to help Margot in some way. Um, and when he's looking at Patricia, he's kind of trying to figure out why Patricia would help Margot. Did Patricia help Margot kill the person? Or is she just trying to protect a friend? Or is she actually telling the truth and is hiding something else? But this is the signal that he does notice something strange about Patricia. This interview is a bit suspicious. Okay, other thoughts about number 3? Well, maybe at first he's only talking to Patricia to ask about Margot. Yes, because Friday Guy is a regular library patron. Yeah, the other death in the story is also a library patron. People are not supposed to die that frequently in the library or related to the library. So it looks like the cop's first goal is to ask about Margot. He has learned that Patricia and Margot live in the same building. So maybe he's thinking maybe Patricia can give him more information. But then, first of all, she gives him no information. And secondly, she seems strangely nervous. And maybe this is when the detective realizes, wait, something is wrong with Patricia too. Yeah? Okay. Other thoughts or questions about this one? Okay. Question 4. Do you think Yvonne is right to make page 99? So after the cop leaves, Margot's behavior is still very strange. She kind of loses her temper again. Uh, so Yvonne, where is it? What page was it? 9900. So Yvonne asks her to take a break. We can see this here on page 99. Let's start here. You've had a tumultuous time recently, haven't you? Tumultuous means kind of rough, a rough time. She asks when we're both settled in chairs. Her voice is okay, so this is from Margot's perspective. Her voice is low and smooth, her look sympathetic, her hands folded before her on the desk. The reasonable administrator, the caring, observant boss. She reminds me of the clueless social worker they assigned to my case after my childhood home burned down. All queasy faux warmth and lollipops, trying to bribe the truth out of me, which she never did. Faux is French for fake. Keeping my voice even. I just mean with the recent events. 2 patrons lost in a short while. One of them found near your home. Interest from the police. She lists them all, staring at me as if I were slow. Slow here means stupid. Say something along the lines of what I said to Detective Parson. Life is strange, loss is tragic. But before I can, Yvonne clears her throat, reaches out to straighten some papers on her incredibly tidy desk, and continues. It's just that I've noticed some erratic behavior on the floor, as we discussed not long ago. She levels a look at me. Levels here means aims. She aims a look at me. I realize my underarms are damp and wonder if she can see stains spreading. I think you should take some time off, maybe 2 weeks or so, and sort things out. There's nothing to sort out, I retort, then regret it. I've scared her, I see. The knuckles on her clasped hands are whitening. I can tell the reason you and time off. You need to take a break from work for a little while. More firm, more commanding. You're right here waiting for you to get back. Or, I'm not sure how we'll manage without you for even such a short time. No, I know what she's doing. Gently, sneakily forcing me out. At the end of 2 weeks, after I've twiddled my thumbs at home, I'll get a call or an email, and Yvonne will tell me that I can't come back, that I'm not so indispensable after all, that the library is no longer my second home, my safe retreat. My eyes start to fill with tears, and Yvonne reaches across to pat my hand. I have to fight the urge not to pull it back or slap her with it. You deserve some downtime anyway. You never take vacations. You're never sick. Go home and take care of yourself for a while. I want to tell her that this is where I care for myself. This is where I heal. But she wouldn't understand. She's done with me. She said the last word. I try to rise from the chair, but feel gravity and my still sore muscles weighing me down. I push harder, putting my hands flat on Yvonne's desk, and eventually manage to stand. You can leave early today if you like, Yvonne says in her softest voice. I look in her eyes, so full of what seems to be genuine concern, and shake my head. I'll stay until the day is done. She nods and puts her hands in place on her computer keyboard, ready to move on. She looks relieved now that our little talk is over. I walk out with the burden that she's shifted to me, as heavy as dead Steve, as hard as heaving him into the dumpster. Margot to take a break. On the one hand, Margot's behavior has been kind of strange recently. And that's the standard thing to do, right? If your coworker or subordinate seems to be having trouble at work, you want to give them some room, give them some space, give them support. But maybe the support that Margot needs is not a vacation. There are many other kinds of support. So it does look like, at least from Margot's point of view, Yvonne's main goal isn't to help Margot. Her main goal is to try to solve this problem of Margot behaving in a strange way. So from this perspective, Margot is afraid that after 2 weeks, she won't be able to come back. This fear does seem a bit justified. If Yvonne is only trying to solve this problem, there's no reason for her to give Margot her job back after 2 weeks. Maybe Yvonne will even look for a new employee during these 2 weeks. The number 2 weeks is also important because in the United States, if you quit your job, you're supposed to tell your boss 2 weeks before you go so that your boss has time to prepare your replacement. So 2 weeks, a very suspicious amount of time. So we understand Yvonne's thinking, right? Which she doesn't like to do things like this. We can tell that she's nervous every time she has to scold Margot. But if she really wanted to help solve the problem, she could have offered other kinds of services, such as mental health leave or like a pay raise, or she could ask Margot, "What do you need?" Instead, she just says, "Go home for 2 weeks." Who knows? Maybe uh, Margot would have needed a vacation, but this would not be the right way to do this. Also, Yvonne points out Margot never takes a break. You never take vacations. You're never sick. So why would Margot need a vacation if she never takes a vacation? This alone should tell Yvonne that the library is where Margot feels the best, is where she feels like she belongs. Forcing her to leave the library is more painful than having her work a full day. So we know Margot's crazy, but even crazy people notice things. And she has noticed that Yvonne doesn't really, Yvonne cares more about the library than she does about her employees. Other thoughts or questions about number 4? Uh, so this is one valid option to deal with the Margot problem, but it probably is not the best way. The best way is to probably ask Margot if Margot needs anything. And then if Margot can't come up with anything, then Yvonne can suggest that she take a break. And if Margot doesn't want to take a break, Yvonne could ask Margot, okay, then can you suggest something else? And then if Margot can't suggest anything else, then Yvonne can force her to take a break. Yeah, in some sense, she can feel things about other people, right? Earlier, a few weeks ago, we saw her pretending to have empathy, which means she knows what other people feel. She just doesn't feel that herself. So she's also correct in her feeling about Yvonne. And also, if Yvonne does want Margot to take a break, it should be 1 week break, not 2 weeks. 2 weeks is very strange in the US, right? Because it's the same amount of time as when you're leaving a job. Other thoughts or questions? Yes. Yes. We can kind of tell that Yvonne is not using the best strategy because after the meeting, even during the meeting, Margot gets more and more angry. Of course, that's not the only standard, right? Margot got angry during the last meeting too. But Yvonne does not seem to recognize that this approach is maybe not the best approach. It's very top down, right? You're not doing well. I want you to go home and take a rest. No other options. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, before taking the break, I want to read one key section to you. Margot comes out of Yvonne's office. Patricia passes her on the way to the bathroom. And then Margot notices Patricia's notebook. Everything I don't know about her is contained in that notebook of hers. It must be. I can see it from here, closed on a pen, but left in plain sight. I stand stock still, listening to the sound of her retreating footsteps. Then I speed across the carpet to reference, reach out, and pluck her notebook from the desk. The pen falls to my feet. Before I bend to retrieve it, I open to a random page. When she punctured the skin of the patient's neck with her needle, she gave a deep sigh. It was a sigh of relief and release, something close to ecstasy, but not quite. Ecstasy would come soon, when she would clamber on top of the woman and lie astride her, put her face close to hers, breathe in her musty breath, and watch her die. It's actually pretty accurate. I freeze for a moment, absorbing the words, rereading them. Then I flip frantically through the notebook, finding references to M, descriptions of my face and figure, which means body, and even outfits I've worn in recent weeks. I read a scene about M standing over a fire in the woods, burning evidence that makes my blood run cold. I knew she might have seen me lighting fires, but this reads as if she hid in the woods and watched me. I read another part that describes Friday Guy's murder and the disposal of his body. Some details are off, but the essence of what happened is there. Again, almost as if she'd been watching. But she can't have been. She must have imagined it all, but imagined it around a hard kernel of fact. She knows about me, about Jane. Okay, with that, let's take a short break. asks about the acknowledgments, 致谢, after the end of the book, and if the acknowledgments affect your reading experience. Do you guys read the acknowledgments? 你们去读致谢吗? Yeah, I included for a reason. Acknowledgments can be very interesting if you know what to look for. Acknowledgments. Many thanks to this person, my superb and stalwart agent, for his feedback, enthusiasm, and all-around invaluable support. So she has a book agent, 有代理人. This person, my hardworking, brilliant editor, whose astute notes made this a better book, and to another person for loving the book first. So this Sally person is probably the first reader of the author's early draft. The entire Putnam team, Putnam is the publisher, for making this novel a real and beautiful object in the world and then putting it into readers' hands. Special thanks to these people. This person, who beautifully manages the Hollywood side of things. So she also has a film agent or a Hollywood agent. He's probably going around trying to sell the movie rights or the TV rights to her book. My smart, dedicated, funny, and fun-loving coworkers at South Orange Public Library. So the author is a real librarian working in a public library. Including these two people who welcomed me warmly when I first walked through the door. I'm especially grateful to this person who told me a true library story that planted a seed in my mind. You'll notice these three words are capitalized, not because it's a proper noun, but in order to emphasize their importance. Apparently, the story that this Michael person told the author became the beginning of this book. Thank you to this person who helped with a crucial criminal technical detail, something about the way Margot kills people, maybe. And to this person who acts as my chief librarian publicist. So this person probably helps promote her books among fellow librarians. Criminal, the podcast 播客节目 that introduced me to Jolly Jane Toppin and the books that helped me develop my own Margot and Jane. These two books, Fatal and The Good Nurse. So the story of Jane seems to be based on a real story. Criminal is a podcast that talks about real criminal cases. And also two different people wrote a book about Jane the Killer Nurse. So this character does seem to actually exist in the real world. My local writers groups for all the friendship, joy, commiseration, and support. Okay, so she's also working with other writers. This person, owner of the Right Space, the quiet oasis where I wrote and revised much of this novel. So apparently her writers group works in like a writing space. My friends near and far, especially to my first readers, for their keen insights and endless encouragement. My parents, by birth and marriage, who are wonderfully supportive. So both sets of parents, and she's married. And finally, these two people, my constants, my everyday companions, how lucky I am to have you. I'm going to guess that these two are her husband and her son. Okay, so does anything in the acknowledgments affect your reading experience? Right, so based on what we just looked at, two things stood out to me. First, she is an actual librarian. So everything she writes about how a library works, interactions with library patrons, describing a library space, all of these are based on her own experience. Yeah, maybe even the kind of coworker that she has, although maybe not, because if you think about her coworkers, they all they each fit a different type. Yvonne, the clueless boss; Nazreen, the kind-hearted uh, coworker; Liz, the more strict and uh, detailed coworker; and then Margot herself is kind of bringing energy, and then Patricia is the new girl from the big city. They all fit types. So maybe her coworkers are not based on her real coworkers, but she has been thinking about what kind of people work at a library. And the second thing that jumped out at me is that the character of Margot, at least in the first part of her life as a killer nurse, was based on a real killer nurse. And then someone helped her with a crucial criminal technical detail. So the way that Margot kills people is also probably very closely reflecting the way that Jane killed people. So just like Margot says about Patricia's notebook, she imagined everything, but there is a kernel of truth at the center, a kernel of hard fact at the center of this story. Yeah, yes, Jolly Jane Topman was a real killer nurse. So how does that affect your reading experience? Right. So we now know where the author got many of her ideas, but also maybe previously when reading about this serial killer and like seeing how she thinks, how she feels, how she justifies herself, maybe you've been saying to yourself, oh, it's just fiction, it's just a story. But in the acknowledgments, the author reveals that yes, it is a fictional story, but it's based on real events. That there really was a nurse who went around killing patients using a method very similar to the method in the book. So if at certain points throughout the book you were thinking, maybe Margot has a point, or yeah, I understand why Margot feels this way, you're not just agreeing with a fictional serial killer, you might also be agreeing with a real serial killer. Isn't that fun? Okay, we have finished the entire damn book. You have other thoughts or questions? Not very happy with the ending, are we? Yeah, well, when the story is introduced and we figure out what the story is going to be, I think we can all agree that the ending has to involve the two women in some kind of struggle. Maybe they would end up agreeing with each other and go on a killing spree together, but more likely there would be some kind of confrontation. Uh, the part that we're not sure about is what kind of confrontation and who wins and who loses. Endings are hard. You can have great ideas, but once you have ideas and you start presenting those ideas, the universe of possibilities starts to slowly close until sometimes when you reach a certain point, there is only one logical conclusion. This works for when you're making arguments and giving reasons. This also works for fiction because we all tacitly assume that the world works in a certain way. So if something happens that does not fit our model of the world, we start to lose a little trust in the author. We start to lose a little uh, suspension of belief. We start, or I should say, we kind of stop not believing. We kind of stop believing a little bit. So to quote Stephen King, if you didn't like the ending, I don't know what to tell you. That's the only ending I have. And Stephen King was talking about a book that I do think had a bad ending. So I know how you feel. Other thoughts about this book or questions? All right, if not, I'm going to make a few quick announcements and then we'll get to the final exam. Uh, Wanted to remind you that you have the opportunity to do this extra credit. There are rules, so you do need to follow these rules if you want the extra credit. If you do this successfully and correctly and on time, your lowest grade will be 60. Your highest grade will depend on what your midterm grade was because I can't adjust your midterm grade. The deadline is next week, the same deadline as for the final exam. But this is more of a reminder. The real deadline, let me show you. It says here it will be cut off on January 13th. So that is your deadline. Because I have to submit your grades, I think, on January 15th. Yes, I have to submit your grades on January 15th. So your real deadline is January 13th. Try not to leave it too late, right? And so I know just for the extra credit. This is for the extra credit. Yeah, the deadline on the middle page is next week, same as the final exam. But for the extra credit, you can submit a late answer all the way to January 13th. Yes, for the final exam, it's next week. The it'll in like 40 minutes, and your deadline is Christmas, midnight. Merry Christmas. If you do the extra credit, I do want to remind you, don't use Google Docs. If you do use Google Docs, be aware of this problem. There is a word count. You do need to fulfill a minimum number of words. But if you use Google Docs, you save it as a Word file, you could run into this problem. The computer says that each letter is one word. So 2,000 words, 300 words. And if you do run into this problem, I have told you how to solve this problem. It's very annoying. Just don't use Google Docs. Okay, questions about the extra credit? No, okay, now let's move into the exams. I'm going to remind you one more time about the exam rules just to make sure you know what they are. Your answer must be an English essay with multiple non-itemized paragraphs. 要用英文写，要分多段，不能只写一段，不能分项列点。不管你是用标号1、2、3这边都不行，not numbered or unnumbered list。基本上就是我要你写一篇文章，分多段的文章。It will be graded according to accuracy, logic, and source. What evidence are you using? Is it correct evidence? Where is the evidence in the book? Does the evidence actually help your answer? 你举的是什么责任？你举的是什么证据？举的对不对？那个证据所谓的页数对不对？然后这个证据是不是真的能够支持你的答案？这是评分标准。Give at least 4 different discontinuous pieces of specific evidence. So 4要举证4个不同地方的证据，不能连续，不能说连续4个句子，就是要从文本的4个不同地方，至少4个。And add the location information right next to your evidence. 那个什么资料来源啊、页码什么，请直接加在隔壁，不要加在最下面什么参考资料。 你举证你就直接告诉我第几页，页码就可以了。Yeah, page numbers 这样就可以了。You can use any resource except other people, but you can ask me questions. If you use additional information from other sources, also give me the name, location right next to your information. 如果你使用外源资料的话，一样就是你引用进来之后，立刻在隔壁用括号告诉我从哪边来的，它的标题是什么。如果是网络资料，网址是什么？如果是书的话，页码是什么？如果是影片的话，时间戳记是什么？如果你全部写在下面参考资料，我会当做不存在。就是这一点。If you don't give me that information right next to it, I will pretend that it does not exist. If you don't answer the question, don't follow these rules, or you plagiarize, you will get a zero. 如果没有答题，或是格式错误，或是抄袭，直接0分。AI gives terrible answers, and you may not see why they're terrible. If you want to use AI, go ahead. I noticed many of you used AI for the midterm, but you have to make sure that the evidence is correct, the page number is correct, and that your answer makes sense. AI does not guarantee these three things. So far, so good? Questions? Okay, so one last thing is, due to my own personal schedule, I may not be able to grade your exam until next year. I know the deadline says Christmas. That's your deadline. So if you're thinking about whether you need to do the extra credit or not, you may not want to wait. You may want to get an early start. And also, when I do give you your grade, Moodle should send you an email. If you have not been receiving Moodle emails this semester, I highly encourage you to try to go fix that problem. Just so you know your score as soon as you receive it. And if there are other problems, I'll also send a Moodle email to tell everybody. Emails are very important for this class, for the future. If you don't receive Moodle emails, you should solve that problem. Call the school, figure out what's going on, just fix it. Okay, and then once again, here is a bad example, and then here are some good examples. I encourage you to read this example. Let's read it together, actually. It's asking about a story called Barn Burning. It begins by answering the question immediately. Then we have evidence related to ideas. So when this character says, when this, we have a paper, either a quotation or a specific detail. Both are fine. And then after all of this evidence is presented, we have the general conclusion, which is repeating the same answer as the beginning. You'll notice that there is no like number 1, number 2, number 3. It's an essay. This is what I'm hoping to see. It doesn't have to be exactly like this. I actually wrote this one, so it's probably a better answer than most students could have produced for this question. But like this is like your ideal. You're aiming for this. Okay, finally, let's take a look at the question. The exam will begin at 4:40, but we can look at the question now. Fully the exam rules on Moodle before proceeding, just in case you forgot. Answer one of the following questions. If you answer both, I will give you the higher grade. Number 1. How do you think Patricia gradually becomes Margot over the course of the novel? Is not asking you, does Patricia slowly become Margot? It's saying, yes, she does. Explain how. Question 2. At one point, Patricia thinks has infected Margot. She feels Margot speaking in my ear, telling me what she did and how it felt. Do you think something similar happens for Laura Sims, the author of the novel? Does the author gradually lose control of her story? If your answer is yes, explain how. Question is no. You should choose a number of representative scenes and explain why the author is still fully in control.这小说的演进 Patricia 如何逐渐变成 Margot？不是问你是否变成 Margot，是告诉你他有逐渐变成 Margot，问你要你解释这个过程。第二题，这边有2个地方 Patricia 在讲说，他在写 Jane 或是 Margot 的故事的时候，感觉好像被他的角色给影响，甚至听到 Margot 在直接跟他讲话，说明做的。同理，你是否觉得这本小说的作者也有发生类似的事情？也就是说，作者有没有好像逐渐对自己的就失去对自己故事的控制？如果你的答案是的话，请说明这过程是如何发生的。如果你的答案是非的话，或是否的话，一个大概表性的场景，然后说明为什么看起来好像渐渐失控，但是作者其实还是稳稳掌控着故事的发展跟呈现。Questions? Okay, so I will be here to answer your questions. If you have any, good luck on the exam. Don't discuss with your classmates. Okay, that's it.